It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week, we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. The views and opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the network, or our sponsors.
But actually trying to find somebody that can come on.
Okay, and we are live now. It's Travis talking in the background, getting excited about a new about a new shtick.
Shush. A new shtick.
New shtick.
I need a new shtick. My shtick's worn out.
You know, that sounds like one of those personal problems that you get to deal with on your own. Yep.
It does. Not on Mystic Moon time. So.
No.
Oh my God.
Well, our song was "Wolves at the Door" by Bad Seed Rising. So there's that.
There is that, and I love that song. We do play that one quite a bit, but it's because we both love it.
Right? Yeah.
It's one of those. Of course, it's got it's about wolves, which I have this wolf affinity. It's like my, I would say it was my spirit animal, but I think my spirit animal is more like I don't know, jackass, donkey.
Hey, you know.
A llama.
How does that go? Something about you can get a good elephant or you can get a bad elephant, but it's always good to get a good piece of ass, you know, or something. How did that go? It was some political, you know, terminology thingamajigger.
I don't know, but I heartily agree with the sentiment. Wow, this show has already this show has taken a spiral downward already, and we haven't even got the guest on.
Telling you, I've had a day. I've really tried to rein in my just my mood, my whole outlook on life right now. So you're going to be lucky if I don't rip everyone a new flippin' rear end hole.
I'm going to say there's two things. While we were in the green room for the show, Wendy dropped the F-bomb. And that never happens. She dropped the F-bomb. I typically do that, not Wendy. Number two, the dynamic of this relationship is I am not the positive, upbeat one. I'm more Charlie Brown to her Linus. Or... You know, of all the Charlie Browns in the world, I'm the Charlie Browniest. I mean, you know, or Eeyore to her Piglet, or I'm not exactly sure. But what I do know is that I can't be the upbeat, positive one and keep things flowing in a positive direction. That's just not my bag, baby. To quote Austin Powers, you know, just.
I'll do my damnedest. That's all I can promise.
You're gonna have to come down soon, Wendy lady, soon. I'm gonna have to find a fairy and sprinkle you with Tinkerbell dust.
I will bitch slap that sucker.
Do you know Tinkerbell? Have you seen her attitude? She likes that stuff.
Oh, well, that's a whole different Tinkerbell. That's not actually Tinkerbell.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's what's her name from Scrooged.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's right, yeah. The bitch hit me with a toaster. I love a girl with spirit.
What the hell? What is that? What was that? You probably didn't even hear that. I
didn't hear a thing. But I can't hear out of the left side of my head, so I have like no hearing.
I think it went live. Why did that go live right there? Okay, never mind. Sorry. Technical difficulties, and okay. I think I'm back.
We have them all the time.
Yes, indeed.
Although my favorite quote from Bill Murray and Carol Kane in that particular interaction is, "If you touch me again, I'm going to rip your goddamn wings off, okay?"
Good luck with that.
Oh, my God. Wendy has not had a good day. I've actually, you know, ironically, because typically I'm the one bitching and moaning, while today was not great, and every time I turned around, I had like 3 different people in my office wanting something. You know, like donate blood, give a kidney, be an organ donor. It's like, please, my organs, they revoked my organ donor card.
Science fiction didn't even want those things.
No. It's like, no, thank you, sorry. These things need to be in canopic jars in Egypt with the mummies. Just take these things away. I know, right? So, anyway. We have, I was telling Wendy, folks, you know, last week we had Tia Bell on the show, who had assisted Bill Bean in a deliverance back in October. She came on to talk about the deliverance, and we, of course, talked to her about her past, her special gifts, her background in law enforcement, things like that. Well, Bill Bean called me today. And Bill wants to come back on the show on the 10th and continue talking about that particular deliverance, but from his perspective and what he experienced and what he encountered. But it is very possible, not sure, but it is very possible that Bill is actually going to be in Lexington, Kentucky that day, which is about an hour and a half from where I am. Okay. And he is going to be performing a deliverance that day, and he has asked me to come and assist. Okay, there we go. I was waiting for the response. I'm
going to pray for the afflicted.
You know what?
Yes.
Well, not a thing. I'm just saying.
Uh-huh.
But
you thought, well, yeah, that's fair.
Well, that's true. The idea is that I will go help him with that deliverance, and then he and I will actually do the show live together from Lexington that night.
Interesting. Okie dokie.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. So cool. I will keep everyone updated.
Stay tuned for further developments.
Stay tuned. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Oh, that was such a horrible show.
It was, wasn't it? It was god awful.
I watched an episode
you watched it like
when cable was out and had to watch it on the antenna TV. And, oh, dear God, I couldn't even do it.
Oh, I know. I remember. I watched it. I guess I got introduced to it back in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember from the 70s a bit, but not... I remembered it not being very good, right?
Yeah,
but, yeah, it's worse now that I'm an adult.
Yeah, but, very iconic. I mean,
yes, very much so. Very much so.
For many people, that is their Batman. That's who they remember. But yeah, it's a bad show. But hey, what are you going to do? I mean,
it's a bad bat show.
It was a bad show. But this is kind of bittersweet tonight. This is the last show of 2017.
Yes, it is. I don't know that it marks any other milestones, but here we are.
Damn, you are just a downer. I was going to say, I was just thankful that 2017 is leaving. I'm saying I'm going to kiss my ass 2017 because this year has sucked. But
yes,
you had
it has,
to just go
and it's going out at the high of that suckdom.
Oh my God! It's like we did yesterday on Town Talk on the AM station. There, we did a year-end review, and we played sound bites from some of our highlight shows and things like that. And Kevin and I were talking. I'm like, 2017 professionally was actually a pretty good year. For Eastern Kentucky, there where I'm managing the radio station, it's a stellar year. We had, state representatives, federal representatives, from those from Frankfurt, those from D.C. in Eastern Kentucky, at least 4 times over the course of the year. And it was all for positive reasons. They were coming to make major announcements about economic development and growth and things like that. There was a few, there were a few negative things. We had the white supremacists, the same ones that were in Charlottesville, Virginia. In the summer, we had those fuckers in April.
Did you hear that, audience? Close your ears. He said the F word.
Well, I figured I could get away with it tonight since you're in such a poor mood.
No, because I did not click the explicit content.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But,
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I won't do that anymore. But I think when it comes to well, not tonight, but I think when it comes to white supremacists, that's just kind of a given.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah, completely.
So, but Kevin and I were talking. I said, but on a personal level, this year has sucked ass. This year, I didn't say that. Of course, I'm on terrestrial radio, so I can say that.
Right.
This year sucked. This year has been horrible. I'm just so ready for 2017 to be over. And so here we are. Sunday night is New Year's Eve. We ring in 2018. And was it you or was someone else telling me that Mercury is finally coming out of retrograde about goddamn time?
Yeah, I forget which one. I think Cindy may have posted that.
Yes,
or
that's
else
what
it was Christy Lee, one of the two of them.
Somebody posted that, it's finally Mercury's coming out of retrograde. It's about time. I mean, I've been stuck in retrograde now pretty much for the better part of 2017. And I don't like Mercuries. I'm not really a Ford fan in general.
No, not actually.
But
found on road.
But I digress.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I digress. But we have a great show tonight.
Yes,
I think, and actually, I think this is a very fitting topic for the end of the year. It kind of wraps up, this particular year for Mystic Moon Cafe. We've done a lot of different shows this year, things we've never really done before. We've had a lot of psychics on, and that's something we've never really done that. We've probably had more Wiccans and pagans and witches on.
Spiritualists and things.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my.
Than we've ever had before. We've kind of broadened the scope of guests. Of course, Nick Redfern has been on several times, and he's going to be coming back on probably the end of January.
Okay. Well, let me know.
February to talk about. Yeah, I will. When he was on the show the last time, that's what we were talking about. End of January, 1st of February, to talk about the Slender Man book that he has coming out.
Right.
So the doors have kind of opened for us. We've gotten different guests. We've done some different things. Really want to get June and Kim back on. I think we need to have just a night of fun and decompression and have a few drinks and maybe talk movies and do some movie reviews and things like that. I think that would be fun in January.
Okay.
And don't forget, my birthday's in January.
Okay, because unless Facebook tells me, I really don't remember birthdays anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't either. I know my son, I know my daughters, and that's pretty much it. And it's like, I don't know. And my cousin had a birthday on Christmas Eve, and it's kind of hard to forget that one. He and Jesus share the same birthday.
Once you get past the half century mark, it just doesn't matter anymore.
It really doesn't.
No.
But actually, I think my birthday's on a Wednesday. My birthday is on a Wednesday this year. We should have. I've been wanting a roast.
Bash.
I really think you guys. I think it should be a roast.
Okie dokie.
Because I am all for that.
I think I can set the call up so that we give the intended guests a code to click and come in. Yeah, I think we can do that.
That would be funny.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up for that. as long as I'm drinking that night, I'm up for it.
Right. Right.
Oh.
Well, I think we ought to go ahead and bring Paul on shortly.
That's what I was going to say.
He just messaged and.
I want to go ahead and get him on. I'll do his when we get him. I've got his bio, and then we're going to get right to talking with Paul Davids. He is co-author of Blowing America's Mind, and I will give you the subtitle. When we come back.
Okay.
I said mind.
You did, yeah. I'm going to blow my nose while we're getting him on the line. So there.
What song are we listening to while we're getting Paul on the line?
We're going to listen to Feast of Fear by Lonesome Wyatt and Those Poor Bastards.
Sounds good to me. Let's get Paul on the line.
Here we go.
Days before the axe within this cage of burning leaves. Everyone's here for the feast of fear. Blow it away, blow it all.
And that was Feast
And
of
we're
Fear.
back.
Go ahead, Travis.
No, it's fine. I thought you said go.
No, you're,
so I was
you're
like, okay, what am
slow,
I supposed
mister.
to
You're
say?
just slow.
It's after Hump Day. I don't know what the day after Hump Day is, except maybe Bottom Out Day.
Possibly.
And that's kind of where I am, and as where you are, as a matter of fact. No, tell the audience what they just listened to.
Feast of Fear by Lonesome Wyatt and Those Poor Bastards.
I just love hearing you say bastards. It just cracks me up.
You're a sick individual. You do know that.
It's not funny when I say it, because I say stuff like that all the time. But when Wendy says those kinds of things, it's like, she did not. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. She did, as a matter of fact.
Oh, no, she didn't. We're very excited tonight. As I was saying before we actually took the break to hear the song and bring our guest on, a very interesting topic for tonight, and I think a really, really cool topic to end this year of Mystic Moon Cafe. Wendy and I were talking, kind of hard for me to believe that this year has come to an end. We've had so many great guests and so many great topics. But tonight is one that we've never really dealt with, and very excited for this opportunity tonight. Tonight we have Paul Davids with us. He is the co-author of a book entitled Blowing America's Mind, and it is subtitled A True Story of Princeton, CIA Mind Control, LSD and Zen. And I just don't know what else you could pack in there to make it an interesting title and an interesting topic. And we're going to bring him on in just a moment, but I want to read you his bio and a little bit about the book, and then we're going to jump right in to talking with Paul Jeffrey Davids. He is the co-author of 6 Star Wars books for Lucasfilm. That right there is a question in and of itself we'll be asking, I guarantee you, here in the course of the show. He was production coordinator and writer on the original animated Transformers TV series, executive producer of Showtime's Roswell, the UFO cover-up, one of my favorite UFO movies, and a very hard UFO movie to find, by the way, if you're out there looking for it, almost impossible to find. Starred Kyle MacLachlan and Martin Sheen. He's produced and directed 10 feature films, including The Sci-Fi Boys, The Life After Death Project, both of which aired on Sci-Fi, and Jesus in India, and the biopic, or biopic, depending on how you pronounce that particular word, Timothy Leary's Dead. As an undergraduate at Princeton, he won 3 top writing awards, then studied under full scholarship at the American Film Institute Center for Advanced Film Studies in Los Angeles. He is the best-selling co-author of An Atheist in Heaven, The Ultimate Evidence for Life After Death, published in 2016, as well as being an accomplished artist. Paul Jeffrey Davis, thank you so much for being on Mystic Moon Cafe this evening.
Well, thank you, Travis. That was a terrific introduction.
Yes.
Well, your publicist wrote it really well. It was easy to read.
Very true. Very true. Yes, welcome.
I wish I could. Yeah. Shut up, Wendy. I wish I could take credit for that. Okay, I want to kind of frame what we're talking about, because when I gave the title of the book, there's a lot there. We're talking CIA, we're talking mind control, we're talking LSD, we're talking Zen mysticism,
and we're talking about the Ivy League. We're talking about Princeton University.
Yes, Princeton University. So all of these things, and I think, there are those of us growing up, especially post Watergate. There is a definite distrust in the U.S. government. prior to Watergate, there was this blind allegiance to the U.S. government. You accepted, you believed. Post-Watergate, we started seeing that those individuals that we thought were looking out for our best interest were not always doing so. Maybe they were looking out for our best interest, but they were not telling us everything. Maybe they shouldn't tell us everything. It's a back and forth kind of discussion and debate. So for a lot of individuals now, especially, we've seen movies, we've read books. There was Firestarter in the 80s dealing with the CIA and mind control. You had The Fury with Kirk Douglas. Individuals now growing up with Stranger Things on Netflix, dealing with a very similar kind of the government in a small town, running tests, not telling people what's going on. Wendy and I are huge Stranger Things fans.
Definitely.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So you have all of these things that people are now much more familiar with than they were when what was transpiring was happening to you and your co-author. So I guess my question is, how the hell did you come about saying it's time to tell this story?
That's a really good question. Well, I think first we waited until everybody in the book was deceased, except for us.
That helps.
Because we really did have qualms and concerns about when best to release it. I mean, the book takes place in the late 1960s, when Princeton was still an all-male school. And nearby was the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute, which happened to be a hotbed of research of the psychedelic drugs and also deep hypnosis. And some of the most famous researchers in that field were there, especially Dr. Humphrey Osmond. He's the psychiatrist who coined that term, psychedelic, in the first place. So my co-author, John Selby, and I, we were psychology majors at Princeton back then. And we lived this book. What we tell in Blowing America's Mind is what we experienced by becoming unwitting guinea pigs and volunteering to be subjects at the New Jersey Neuropsych Institute while we were Princeton students. And Travis and Wendy, it wasn't until many years later that it was publicly exposed that this was part of the CIA's MKULTRA, that's their mind control project. And what that mind control project was, the extent of it was staggering. And, I mean, you mentioned Stranger Things and experiments in a small town. Well, these were real experiments all across America on, in many cases, people who did not give their consent. In our case, it was different. We had volunteered. But there were many experiments on people who never knew they were being experimented on with all kinds of drugs. There were 139 drugs tested. There were 149 different kinds of experiments, 86 different American institutions where this happened. So Blowing America's Mind is focused on mainly on what happened at the New Jersey Neuropsych Institute. It's our story. But meanwhile, there were people who were subjects not just at research centers, but at various universities. I mean, both Princeton and Columbia and Harvard were involved. And we have the news articles in the book that, support all of this and the history, the facts behind it. But you also had hospitals where they were experimenting on patients. You had prisons, and as I said, the colleges. So it was a massive project going on. It went on from the 1950s. We know it went on till just about the end of the 1970s, and whether they changed the name of it and continued it after that, who knows? I mean, it was all classified, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the background of how we became involved and why write the book. We felt that what we experienced there was really an important thing to share, to tell, but when to share it. I mean, we waited a really long time. I think we waited until, things sort of run around in circles. And I think that the psychedelic drugs are back now. I mean, Steve Jobs touted his experience with LSD and how it helped him. And there are newspaper articles and studies that say more young people now are using the psychedelics than before. And, of course, now marijuana. which, I don't think it's really been classified as a psychedelic, but some people do. It means mind manifesting psychedelic. But
Right.
now marijuana is legal in half the states, just about, either for medical purposes, or in some states they call it a recreational drug. So things have changed massively from all those years of repression when you couldn't even talk about it. So that's part of the reason why we felt the time was now.
Now, just again, for kind of framing the rest of the conversations that we're going to have for the audience listening tonight, did you and John Selby know one another prior to actually signing up for this experiment? Or did you all meet in the process?
No, we met in the process. John Selby, who became a rather famous writer, by the way, he's written many books that have been published over the last few decades. But at that time, John Selby was a senior at Princeton, and he had been part of the deep hypnosis and psychedelic study program for over a year before I came along. And as a subject, undergoing deep hypnosis a couple times a week and having things done with his mind that memory was blocked on these hypnotic conditions. And he was undergoing a lot of stress, anxiety, and he was having, say, personality problems as a result of having been a subject there. And yet they entrusted him to train him as a hypnotist, to be a research hypnotist, and they wanted him to stay on after he graduated. They told him he wouldn't be drafted, wouldn't be sent to Vietnam. It was during the heat of the Vietnam War. They said the work was in the national interest, which should have made us suspicious right there. I mean, why was this research in psychology and tampering with the mind, why was this considered in the national interest? Well, we had no idea it was part of this vast program. So John Selby was assigned as my hypnotist to train me to undergo deep hypnosis. And I was very positive-minded about the whole thing. I had a really positive attitude toward undergoing the experiences, learning how to undergo deep hypnosis, seeing what would happen. They did sometimes use LSD in very small doses. Sometimes that would be part of the hypnosis session, or sometimes there'd be a placebo. You wouldn't know. But John Selby, while he was training me, was undergoing massive personality turmoil. I think that's one of the things that makes the book so incredibly interesting, that there are two authors. We both lived it, but lived it in different ways. He was more advanced in the program than I was. And as a result of that, you see it from two completely different points of view. He was from the West. He grew up on a cattle ranch. So he was really a cowboy coming into Princeton.
Yeah, he was a cowboy at Princeton. A cowboy at Princeton. That's
right. If you think of the movie, it's an old movie now, but Midnight Cowboy with John Ford and Dustin Hoffman.
Yeah.
Okay. And think about how different the two personalities were. I mean, Dustin Hoffman was the guy living in New York, the Easterner, and then you had the Midnight Cowboy. Well, that was kind of us. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I don't mean to say I was like that Dustin Hoffman character, but just I was as different from John Selby as you could imagine two people being. So, no, we didn't know each other before. I met him the day he was assigned to be my hypnotist, and we became fast friends and became entwined in each other's lives. And those were really, really interesting lives that we were living then at all-male Princeton. And it's all there. Again, the book is blowing America's mind. I mean, it's at Amazon. It just came out. So it's either the printed version, or you can get Kindle. Or if you have some other device, you can find it at Barnes & Noble and, anywhere online. But that's it. We felt that now with the people we were writing about, we used the real names, the scientists, the doctors involved, the president of Princeton University is part of it, because psychedelics were were taking hold at Princeton at that time, and it was a real issue for the administration, and that's part of the book too. I think the other reason we wanted to wait is we were both having successful careers in different ways, but very mainstream. Mm-hmm. You know, I worked on the Transformers, the original cartoons. I was 79 of those animated episodes. I was the production coordinator. It was a very mainstream job for Marvel. And then Lucasfilm hired me to write 6 of the Star Wars sequel books. And then we got Roswell made for Showtime with Kyle MacLachlan. And then my career just kept going. I made one film after another. I produced or directed, mainly on low budgets, but they were all distributed. So I had major distributors like NBC Universal did 5 of my films for international television, and Showtime did Roswell, and Roger Corman released Timothy Leary's Dead, my movie about the LSD guru. So things were going along really swimmingly, and we felt that, hey, when we release Blowing America's Mind, gonna be controversial, not everybody's gonna be happy about it, gonna create some waves at Princeton University, you know, tranquil school, and the oldest school in the country, probably founded 20 years before the Revolutionary War. All right.
Yep.
A lot of highbrows and blue bloods, and you know, I don't know how much they like mixing psychedelic drugs with the good name of Princeton, but that's what we do in Blowing America's Mind. So we're really stepping out there, and we invite people to, you know, take a look, confront this element of reality, because it's really fascinating.
I was going to say, okay, I told you when we were in the green room, you know, the conversation would be fluid, and there's so many questions I want to ask based on what you just said.
Well, you're in trouble now. Yeah.
But I'm not going to right now. I'm going to kind of.
You can go anywhere, Travis. Well, it doesn't matter. You know,
I'm cataloging, categorizing them right now. I have to say, you know, first of all, thank you so much for helping my formative years with the Transformers cartoons in the early '80s.
You're welcome.
79 of those episodes I have to thank you for, so thank you for that, as well as the Star Wars books that you wrote. I actually just had I was texting a friend of mine in Indianapolis who is a huge, diehard Star Wars fan, and I said, you will not believe that I have on my show tonight one of the authors of 6 of the Star Wars books for Lucasfilm, but she just texted back, that is so effing cool. I said, I know, right?
Well, let me tell you the books. It started with The Glove of Darth Vader. This happens after Return of the Jedi. Mm-hmm. Lucasfilm gave us 5 years of Star Wars time to play around with after Return of the Jedi. So my wife and I created what would have been the Star Wars universe during that period of time. After, you know, the death of, well, you know, Darth Vader is out of the picture, the Emperor, and so there's a new ruler for the Empire who we called Trioculus, a mutant with 3 eyes. And that's introduced in The Glove of Darth Vader. And then we had The Lost City of the Jedi and Zorba the Hutt's Revenge. People ask about that because, we created Jabba the Hutt's father, Zorba, who comes back, you know, kind of irritated that Princess Leia bumped off Jabba. Mm-hmm. So there's revenge in Jabba the Hutt's, Jabba the Hutt's Revenge. And then we did Mission from Mount Yoda, Queen of the Empire, and we wrapped it up with Prophets of the Dark Side. So that was a great adventure, and at Lucasfilm, awesome. they illustrated all the books with line drawings, but Drew Struzan, you know, who did all the Star Wars posters and Indiana Jones posters, he did the covers of our books. So I'll tell you that the beautiful, fantastic covers, and I wish I could afford to own one of the originals of those covers, but his prices are, you could buy a house for one of his paintings. So that was early in my career. The Star Wars books happened right after the Transformers.
And I have to, I was going to say, but I have to say, the Roswell movie that Showtime did is by far one of my favorite UFO conspiracy movies. It really is. And we actually have, we have interviewed individuals from the Roswell crash on this program. Individuals, eyewitnesses, and then of course authors who have continued to research it. And it is one of my favorite. And even Nick Redfern just a few months ago came on to talk about his particular theory about the Roswell crash. But I do love that movie. I saw it. Not on Showtime, but after it was released, and I'm aging myself, when it was released to VHS.
Yes.
At the local VHS video rental store in my hometown.
Yes, Republic came out with the VHS before we had DVD, and then Artists and Lionsgate did the DVD, which was available as a DVD for 10 years, and then, as you say, it dried up, hard to find.
Yeah,
I always felt that somebody made it hard to find on purpose.
And you very well may be correct, because it is one of those. It's become almost a lost movie. I mean, it's very difficult to find a copy of that. You can still find some of the VHS.
Yeah, you can if you look around online and use the title Roswell, the UFO cover-up.
Oh, crap! Yes,
the UFO cover-up. You can find it. You'll be able to find it and see it. But no, I was irritated to no end that they stopped releasing the DVD, and all of my efforts to have it re-released. I can tell you it was financed by Viacom, as a Showtime original movie. And then at some point, all the Viacom movies, they went to either Paramount or CBS. Paramount if they were feature films, and they went to CBS if they were television movies. This was a television movie we had made. And so CBS, controls the rights to that movie. CBS, I'm expressing personal opinion here, right? You take no responsibility for the opinions of your guests.
We have a disclaimer at the beginning of the show.
Okay. And my disclaimer is, don't beat me over the head for saying this. However, I go back to the early days of CBS, and that broadcast network has been part of the UFO cover-up from the very beginning. And it's continued for decades. And they've always debunked it. They've always had the show that cast doubt on things that shouldn't have been doubted. So I'm just afraid that we were sort of caught in that maelstrom, and somebody has intentionally made that movie hard to find. But that, it had plenty of air dates. I mean, it came out in 1994. Yep. And again, the things we're writing about now and blowing America's mind, late 1960s, different era entirely, pre-internet. As I said, all male Princeton. Now it's co-ed, and two of the Supreme Court justices who are women, Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, are both graduates of Princeton. So things have really changed from the days that we experienced here. In Blowing America's Mind, we're also recreating the time when Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band came out. That was 1967. The Beatles were saying, "I'd love to turn you on." And Timothy Leary, the psychologist from Harvard, was saying, "Turn on, tune in, drop out." He was proselytizing LSD. And through the hippie movement, it spread, and millions of people had what they call that psychedelic experience. And Travis, I don't know if you've ever dipped your toes in the psychedelic pond, as we say, but it is an extraordinary and life-changing experience, as Steve Jobs has told everyone, and was made illegal in 1966. And they closed down most of the research centers, and they made it illegal even to do research with that, or with the mushrooms, the psilocybin mushrooms, or with peyote, which is mescaline. These are all the psychedelic drugs that they say expand the mind.
Right.
But they are risky. They're risky as well. This is not just a one-way trip to heaven. Some people experience hell,
Well, I was going to say, I have not experimented per se with the psychedelic drugs. The closest, the only illicit, and I use that in air quotes, you all cannot see me, but I'm doing illicit drug in air quotes, is marijuana. And I have smoked marijuana on, literally I can count on both hands the number of times that I have, just because it never was my particular drug of choice for. I mean, I prefer drinking wine or scotch or things like that. But I the experiences that I had, the times that I did smoke marijuana, I could see where that others mind expanding, universe expanding types of drugs would be very, very tempting for individuals. And I was going to say, what we're talking about, and this is totally, well, not totally, but a little bit off the grid and off in a digression, are drugs that in many instances over the years have been used in religious and ritual encounters and experiences, peyote by the Native Americans, mushrooms and other things, to expand, broaden the horizon, and open ourselves up to another realm or another world.
Let me give you an interesting expansion of what you just said, because I mentioned that Dr. Humphrey Osmond was the psychiatrist we talk about in Blowing America's Mind. He was the psychiatrist who was in charge at the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute Bureau of Research. And they were being funded by the CIA, MKULTRA. We didn't know it at the time. But he was British, but he had lived in Saskatchewan, Canada for many years and became absolutely fascinated by these drugs. And he experienced the religious ritual with peyote with the Native American church up in Canada, in Saskatchewan. And of course, the Supreme Court did rule that it was legal for peyote to be used as a religious sacrament by the Native American church. It had been their custom, I think, since before white men came to this continent. However, a lot of people have the question: well, why only them? Why should these drugs be illegal at all? How did that come about? I mean, it came about through fear and enormous scare tactics in the media after the initial introduction of LSD was touting it to the American public as something that could be a psychological cure or something. It was being used in psychotherapy. Actor Cary Grant, his experiences of LSD psychotherapy were widely publicized. There was a positive spin on it at first in Time magazine and Look and Life, the big magazines back then. But then everything turned around, and then we entered the era of just say no. And I mean, you were able to talk casually of having smoked marijuana here in this day and age, still against federal law, still a Schedule I drug. There are states where technically they could still arrest you for simple possession, and people have been sent to jail for 5 or 10 years for simple possession. Timothy Leary was busted for having a couple of joints of pot, and he went to prison. He served 5 years. And someone else from back then, Ken Kesey, very important name from the 1960s. Ken Kesey wrote the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
yes,
which became an enormously important film. And then he wrote Sometimes a Great Notion. So he was in his 20s back then, and he was considered one of the up-and-coming great American writers, the days of Tom Wolfe. And Tom Wolfe wrote a now very famous book called The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. You remember that?
Oh, yes.
The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test was about the adventures of Ken Kesey, who was, again, arrested for possession of 1 or 2 joints of marijuana. And because he was then arrested a second time, he was facing 5 years in prison. He fled the country. He went to Mexico. Eventually, he came back, and they nabbed him, and he had to go through the whole legal thing. But you see, we live in an era now, because it's legal in so many states, it's a schizophrenia, though, isn't it? Because it's not legal in half the states. And according to the federal government, it's not legal at all.
In any of the states.
Yeah, so what does this say about respect for the law in general when you have a situation like this where, half the people in the United States, they don't follow that, law about marijuana at all? What does it do to respect for all the other laws? The fact that the government lets this situation stay this way. I mean, they should have gotten rid of it as a class 1 classification, long ago. I mean, it's really upsetting. Something still needs to be addressed and solved. Mm-hmm. But again, things are different today. In Blowing America's Mind, you're reading about those days when you would go to jail. I mean, there were friends of ours at Princeton who were caught with marijuana. The drug enforcement agents raided their dormitory. They were thrown out of the university the next day, mm-hmm. and faced legal charges. So, but the mind warping that John Selby and I went through, it was legal because it was at the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute. It was government sanctioned. It was deep hypnosis to duplicate the effects of both consciousness expansion of the psychedelics, but also to duplicate a temporary schizophrenia and paranoia, to come to understand the differences in behavior when the mental mindset is changed through hypnotic conditioning. That's what it was all about. Yeah.
And I was going to say, I mean, you're talking about, being college students, having schizophrenia, paranoia, anxiety. That's like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, I remember my college days. I mean, you're constantly dealing with those issues. But you and John Selby actually volunteered to undergo. Now, so help me. I mean, are we talking? Were there flyers posted up in the common halls, and saying if you want to volunteer, come to?
Exactly. Yes, I saw a posted flyer, and I did some research about it. And you see, when I learned that Dr. Humphrey Osmond was in charge of the program, it became all the more fascinating, because he was known at that time as one of the pioneers of psychedelic research. For example, Aldous Huxley, one of the great American writers and philosophers, known for The Brave New World, I think is his most famous book.
Yes.
But Humphrey Osmond knew Aldous Huxley, and Humphrey Osmond turned on Aldous Huxley with mescaline. And from that experience, with Osmond as the guide, you had Aldous Huxley write a book called The Doors of Perception. Became a very famous book where the whole thing, it's only about 80, 90 pages, is a description of his mescaline trip and how he felt it opened his mind and sort of broadened the vistas of his philosophy. So you had that book, and then you had Jim Morrison reads The Doors of Perception, and he names his rock group The Doors, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is the early history of that period. But you want to know why would I volunteer for something like this? I'm a psychology major at Princeton. I have a chance to work with Dr. Humphrey Osmond. Case closed, right?
Right.
I didn't know that Humphrey Osmond was going to be interested in putting me in very divergent mind states, erasing my memory through hypnosis, making me experience, the heaven of expanded consciousness, but also, when I use the word schizophrenia in these hypnosis experiments, I'm not talking about the kind of anxiety most college kids had before an exam. I'm saying they deliberately gave you hypnotic conditions to elicit actual textbook cases of schizophrenic responses while you were under hypnosis. They wanted to understand the difference between madness and the psychedelic drug effect of expanded consciousness. And they did it using hypnosis and LSD. So, Blowing America's Mind, Travis, I want people to know, about the book. It's at Amazon. It just came out about 2 weeks ago. And John Selby and I worked on this for 40 years. We just kept rewriting. We kept learning more about the secrets behind the experiments we were part of, the documents that were declassified, the Senate hearings about MKULTRA that happened. We collected all of the news articles and magazine articles we could from that period that exposed MKUltra. And, we included a lot of those headlines and some of those articles in the book so that you can really see this happened. There's nothing made up here. This is what happened. The only thing we had to fictionalize was some of the characters of the other students at Princeton who were our friends then. You know, we didn't use their real names, and we created a couple of composite characters. And there's a love story here. John Selby and the girl he fell in love with then. And, that real name is not used. But as far as the CIA mind control parts, the doctors and President Robert F. Goheen of Princeton, John Selby's encounters with President Goheen about LSD, word for word as best John Selby can remember it here in the book, and incredibly fascinating to see what the response was of the administration.
Now, I have to ask, when you volunteered, how long were you involved in this program from beginning to leaving the program?
For me, it was about 1 year.
Okay.
With a summer in between.
Okay.
So it was a couple times a week I was out there. And some of the hypnosis sessions would go on for many hours. I mean, there were sessions as long as 4 to 6 hours. But during the training parts of it, a session might be an hour and a half, as you're learning to undergo deep hypnosis.
So a year in the program, you finished that year. How long before you and Selby became aware of the fact that there was a more nefarious for what was going on?
Well, he became aware first.
Okay.
This is, again, one of the things that's interesting about the books, because you're following two characters in it who each know a different amount about what they're going through. And he was 5 steps ahead of me. I'm the naive guy. I'm the younger one, getting into the program with all enthusiasm. Whereas he had suffered from some of it. And he began to suspect. He got into files, and he saw files he was never intended to see back then. And, I don't want to give away too much of the book with spoilers, but, he warned me. It got to a point where he gets out, and he warned me to break free of the Institute. And it was before I could hear it. It was before I could listen to him. And so the whole conflict between us when we went 2 different directions that's really interesting. Then we didn't really talk to each other for a couple of years. He fled Princeton and he went to California, started a new life there, had help from Alan Watts, another top writer, Psychotherapy East and West, who had been peripherally connected with the Institute. But he was California-based, and he helped John Selby after John Selby broke free of the Institute, which was very hard to do. When they've got you in this kind of a program, walking away, it just it's very, very hard to do. So that all of that interplay of the psychology and us going in different directions, it's all a part of what makes Blowing America's Mind an interesting book, I think.
It is, and highly recommended. And as Paul has told you, it's available at Amazon. And we're going to, at the end of the show, give you other venues and avenues by which you can order the book. One of the things that I wanted to ask, as you said earlier, kind of in the preface, that you've been writing, you and Selby have been writing the book for 40 years. Yeah. So at what point did you reconnect and say, we need to tell this story? And then you started working, and that, like you said, it's taken time, and you had to wait for certain things to happen and certain things to fall into place. But at what point did you decide that this story had to be told and you were the ones who were going to tell it?
That's a really good question. So I said that Selby left Princeton and he went to California. And then when I graduated Princeton, I went to the American Film Institute Center for Advanced Film Studies. It was then in Beverly Hills. It was a great opportunity. I was accepted. I was one of only 15 students accepted for the opening year with full fellowship. So I studied film in Los Angeles with a lot of the greats at that point. I had a huge jump start for getting into this profession through the AFI. And as the AFI experience was winding up, I wanted to do this story that became Blowing America's Mind as my first film. I wanted to produce and direct. And so I searched for John Selby then as things were finishing up for me at the Institute. And I found him trying to think whether it was in Sausalito. It was up north. It was near San Francisco. I found him, and I really had to track him down because most people who had known him didn't know where he was anymore. And I pitched him that I had been studying film, and a lot of doors had been opened for me, and I wanted to do it as a movie, and let's write it as a book first. So he agreed, and we began working, and we found, as we worked with each other back then, this was the early 1970s, that we still had some memory blockage from the hypnosis. There were things I clearly remembered that he did not, and vice versa, and we helped each other recover memories. And one of the things that was so good about starting then, which was a few years after all this had happened, is it was still really fresh. The whole Princeton experience, the 1960s, the whole being part of that whole psychedelic revolution time, it was fresh in our minds. So what we were writing had that reality to it. Like, electric Kool-Aid acid test recreates the 60s so brilliantly and accurately. We were striving to do that here. And yet, when we had a talk about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, our story, what we had lived, was a true life. We flew over the cuckoo's nest. That's what you're going to see in Blowing America's Mind. So we started the writing, and we worked for over a year. We took it to a certain point. We just couldn't finish it. And it was frustrating. And at that time, we didn't know about the CIA MKULTRA connection. That revelation came years later. So at a certain point, we stopped. And when we stopped, he went to Mexico. He pitched Warner Books on a story he wanted to write for a novel called PowerPoint. And he went to Mexico to write it. And I stayed in Los Angeles, and I was then working with the great director-producer, George Powell. If your listeners are too young to remember George Powell, he was the first George Lucas.
Yes, he was.
He was responsible for creating the first real high-quality science fiction movies that involved space, too. So George Powell, he did The Time Machine. He was the original Time Machine. And War of the Worlds.
Yep.
Yeah, he did Destination Moon. 20 years before we went to the moon, he showed how it would happen. And that came out, I think, in around he filmed it in 1949, I think it came out then, or 1950. When Worlds Collide, he did The Conquest of Space, which was about the space wheel, the first concept for a station.
International Space Station, yeah.
Exactly. So many of the things George Powell did, as science fiction, came true later. Maybe not The Time Machine, but the others, a lot of them, even War of the Worlds, with the flying saucer situation with UFOs, it's not so far-fetched. So anyway, I was invited to work with George Powell back then, and after the Institute, and we wanted to do the Hobbit. He wanted to make the movie of The Hobbit. And he had me and my wife write the treatment for the movie. But it was so far ahead of its time, Travis, we were rejected everywhere. George Powell could not launch The Hobbit at that point. He was, I think he was 74 when he passed away. So he was, he was old for Hollywood producers at that time, but he couldn't get it launched. And then it took me a long time to get established in the business, but my first break, about 6 or 7 years before Transformers, was working for this great Hollywood agent, Paul Kohner. He had all the top European clients. He had Charles Bronson, and Ingmar Bergman, and John Huston, who's not European, but John Huston was one of his clients. And so I worked as Paul Kohner's right-hand boy at that point. I was in my 20s and read all the scripts and got to go to Mexico and be with John Huston. Got to work with William Wyler, the great director, toward the very end of his life,
Wow.
William Wyler, who did Ben-Hur.
Yes.
And, did about 50 movies, some of them considered some of the greatest American movies. So Paul Kohner got me working with William Wyler. So that's what happened. John Selby goes to Mexico. He starts writing books. He becomes an adventurer. He goes to Germany. He meets and marries a German girl. He does lots of self-help books over there that are published in German, and he doesn't even read German. Couldn't get his books published in English, but they were all published in German first. He was famous in Germany. And he would give sort of encounter groups over there with the translator. I think it was his wife. And he was very popular over there at that time. And then he goes to Kauai, and he lives in Hawaii for, I think, about 20 years. Imagine, he's living in an isolated spot in Kauai. So he didn't connect with Hollywood. He didn't. He was as far from Hollywood as he could get. I stayed in Hollywood, and I went through the system and got to work on one show after another. And our book was forgotten stuff at that time, Travis. It was in a drawer gathering dust. It was unfinished. We didn't know if it would ever be finished. And then came the exposure revelations about MKUltra in the late 1970s, and we tried again. Still couldn't get it right. But it was this year, finally, after all those decades, at the beginning of the year, I got in touch with John Selby, and I said, let's do it this year. Let's finish this book. I want it out there. I believe in it. And he did too. We always believed that it had great potential as an important story, but also, from a literary point of view, we thought that, some of the characters in the book really take on a life of their own. This character, Pac, short for Apocalypse, who's half Native American and half Greek, who had been part of the Hypnosis program, heavily into LSD, had broken free of the program while John Selby was still working there as a hypnotist, and he's one of the terrific characters in the book. Yes. So, blowing America's mind, Amazon, finally finished. You can finally read it after all these decades, and it's real.
And it's enthralling, and it is edge of your seat, and it is eye-opening. And there is one question that I want to ask you out of the list that the publicist has sent us, but something that kind of popped into my head as you were talking right then. You were talking about the book kind of lying in the drawers, being shelved as you were working on different projects, and then there were the Senate hearings on MKUltra. When you started hearing about MKUltra, was it all of a sudden a sweeping revelation going, oh, that's what we were part of? Or were there all of these little dots that you had to connect afterwards? And how did you find out that you had been part of MKUltra?
Well, it was a sweeping revelation for me. John Selby didn't know the term MKUltra. He didn't know what the CIA was calling it. But back then, through some of the files that he got his hands on that he wasn't supposed to, he became aware of the CIA connection. And also there were guys who were like spooks who began to follow both of us. Uh-oh. And that was real. And that's in the book too. Yeah. So he didn't know it was MKUltra. Now, when the mind control projects were exposed, the first thing that was the shock to me was I saw the name Dr. Carl Pfeiffer in the announcements as one of the doctors who had worked for MKUltra. And I said, oh my God, I know Carl Pfeiffer. He handled financial things for the Institute while I was there. And later he formed the Princeton Brain Biocenter. And then along comes a book called Acid Dreams, which was about the 60s and LSD. And they named our project specifically as having been part of MKUltra. I mean, those authors, read all the declassified documents, and they found New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute, Humphrey Osmond, you see, who then he leaves the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute. He ends up at a mental hospital, working in a mental hospital in Alabama. And then the name that comes up is Dr. Bernard Aronson. He was the master hypnotist there. He was Bernie, we called him. He's the main one who hypnotized John Selby for over a year. And Bernie, as you'll see in the book, strange personality, all right? At first he was everybody's good guy. I mean, basically people like Bernie. They found him fascinating. He knew all these esoteric things about psychology and hypnosis and psychedelic drugs. And people gravitated to him. But he had a dark side, too. And, it became obvious to the subjects after a while that he was bisexual. And he had more than a passing professional interest in some of the boys who were in the project. So that was difficult for us to write about in the book, but we had to include it because it was part of what passed, part of what happened. But his name came out too with the exposure, and he had to leave the American Psychological Association. I think they blackballed him. Then he was no longer a member. And then they shut down the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute completely and then reopened it up under another name. Very fishy. They retired all the files, you see, and then it became the New Jersey Developmental Center. What does that mean? What does that mean? I mean, what are they developing, artists? Are they teaching people to sketch? What is that?
We're covering our rear ends and running like hell.
Exactly.
They did.
Yeah,
exactly.
From a marketing standpoint, it's called rebranding, and it doesn't really matter. We're getting rid of the past, and
they rebranded the hell out of it,
yes,
and they got a lot of 2x4 boards to hammer up over the windows of the Bureau of Research where we did our experiments. I went back there in 1988, or 88 or 87, 88, I think it was, and the building was boarded up. But I was able to, look in all the windows, and, the place is just completely covered with dust. Nobody had been there working there for some time. There were overturned desks in the hallways and things like that nobody had ever cleaned up. It was haunting. It was really haunting. And then there was a guard who tracked me down while I was there, looking around, wanted to know what I was doing, and basically kicked me off the premises. I told him the truth that I had worked there, and I named some names, and I said, I just want to see the place again. I used to work there. But he escorted me off the grounds. His security car drove right behind mine as I was leaving until I had passed the gate. So there's that whole aspect of blowing America's mind. Too, and we deal with some of those things in the epilogue because the story takes us through our Princeton days, and then the epilogue takes us after.
What I was going to say, one of the things that does have to be a little bit troublesome, and you do have to handle delicately, like you were just talking about, with the bisexuality of the one character. When you start talking about these things, you are going to start bringing to the surface a lot of tangential kinds of stories that you have to go, okay, do I expose this? Do I bring it out? And if so, is it going to cause harm to someone's life now? Because you're talking about writing a book about things that took place almost 50 years ago.
Yeah. And as I say, Bernard Aronson is deceased, and Humphrey Osmond died, I think, around 10 or 12 years ago. The president of Princeton, Robert F. Goheen, he was later appointed to be the U.S. ambassador to India by President Richard Nixon. All right. One of John Selby's things that he was insistent about, and this is very controversial in the book, because he is just insistent that Robert F. Goheen, president of Princeton, had his CIA connections. And that he knew what was going on at the Institute. And John Selby says strings were pulled for him from the administrative level of Princeton for him to not have to take his psychology classes in his senior year, and to get credit for working out at the Institute, and for Bernard Aronson to be his thesis advisor. So, there's that whole aspect of the question of, some of Robert Goheen's associations. I mean, you don't get appointed to be the U.S. ambassador to India, which actually, is a nuclear-armed state, right? Just because you have a nice smile and everybody thinks that you're a wonderful guy, and the son of, I think, Presbyterian ministers. No, there's something else there, and then there was the fact that these couple of guys kept showing up and were rather threatening, particularly to John Selby when he started making waves. Mm-hmm. And he started talking about some of the things at the Institute and psychedelic drug use at Princeton, and it got in the New York Times. I think he even said there was a CBS report on it on television that his parents saw and were absolutely shocked. I mean, his parents cut him off. They didn't talk to him for years when they found out some of these things that he was involved in. Wow. So, it's all there. It all came back to the surface. It's all part of our cuckoo's nest story.
And it is cuckoo.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is.
And I can only say that I can only have this conversation now so far away from it, Travis and Wendy. There's so much distance, and I've done so many other things, had a good life, had a successful career, been married, we're going on 46 years, my wife and I. Can you believe that?
Congratulations.
Congratulations. That's fantastic.
Thank you. We're going to have our 46th anniversary next month. We have grown children we're very proud of. We have a granddaughter, so it's been a wonderful trip, and it helps me with that sense of confidence about a life well lived to be able to look back and say, well, that part of my life maybe had this darker edge to it, right? Mm-hmm. And I can be honest about that now. Mm-hmm. I don't have to hide it anymore and not talk about it or pretend it didn't happen. No, so that's why it was sort of an act of courage for John Selby and I to release Blowing America's Mind, because we finally said, okay, we're going public with this. We will let people know.
It had to be cathartic at some point, because what you just said right then, I was actually going to ask, basically both of you were carrying around, for in lack of a better term, a cancerous tumor. Mm-hmm. that you needed to excise. I mean, you needed to get rid of what each of you were carrying around. So obviously this was a cathartic process, and say, thank God we can tell our side of the story and let people know what we endured. And obviously your wife, I'm assuming, 46 years of marriage, she probably knew everything that you know. Yeah,
I mean, she heard it from me along the way. I mean, she was at my side during the early years of working with John Selby on this. I mean, she thought it was going to be my first film too, right? Back then, we didn't know how hard it would be. We showed the early manuscript, which you can't really say it was finished because there were too many missing pieces. But we did show it to a number of New York publishers, and they all turned it down. One of those publishers was Charles Scribner's Sons. Now, I had won the F. Scott Fitzgerald Prize at Princeton, awarded by Charles Scribner's Sons for excellence in literary writing while I was an undergraduate. So I thought I had an inside track, maybe to get my first book published with Scribner's. And that Scribner's, after all, was the publisher of F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was a Princeton man. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It was a lot of frustration, and it was cathartic to write it. Another challenge we had with it, Travis, is that we didn't want to make it sound all dark or all bad, because it wasn't. It wasn't. There was a positive side to this, to learning hypnosis and to going through it. I think we both felt that way. And John Selby felt that what he learned about hypnosis helped him throughout his career in writing so many pop psychology books, and in dealing with what they call mindfulness, the Zen part of it, being in the present, increasing your awareness, meditation, relaxation, because a meditative state and relaxation is involved to be able to undergo hypnosis. So it wasn't all negative. We learned some positive things from it. I think I also gained some strength from it, some strength of character. Even just breaking away from it was an act of strength of character. But for me, I had been pushed toward going in a much more conventional career. You know, everybody who knew me from the time I was a kid wanted me to either be a lawyer, they said I had a great legal mind, or be a doctor. And I thought, well, maybe I would I'd major in psychology, maybe I would be a psychiatrist. Maybe I would follow, on the heels of Dr. Humphrey Osmond. But I'd always, since I was a child, had a tremendous passion for making movies, particularly monster movies, special effects films. My friends and I would imitate what we saw in the movies, and we'd create dragons and dinosaurs and mummies and Frankensteins, and we made little movies like this for years, and we became kind of famous as child movie makers. Our famous Monsters of Filmland magazine published about our early movies. We won a national contest. So for me, I had to break away from this idea I was going to medical school and say, wait a minute, nobody thinks I should go out to Hollywood and try and have a career out there, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And that's exactly what I did. And even though my mother at the time said he's throwing his life away when she talked to all my relatives,
right,
it worked out rather brilliantly, all things considered. So we didn't want to paint the Institute as all dark. There was also this wonderful camaraderie there. There was this excitement about the psychedelic era and the discoveries related to psychedelic drugs and Timothy Leary's movement at that time. It's like that song go, there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. Yeah, there was something happening there. It wasn't all dark. As a matter of fact, some of it was downright funny. I mean, there are chapters in the book that will make people laugh. I mean, the scene where I'm turned on with grass for the first time by Pac, it's hysterical. It's really, really hysterical.
It is, yeah.
So there's joy in this too, and there's also the joy of the love story with John Selby and the girl that he fell in love with. The negative part was that the Institute tried to pull him away from that relationship, and it was kind of dirty pool what Bernie Aronson did to interfere with that relationship. But you take the good with the bad, and that's what we give you in the book. We give you all.
And you do. I mean, you paint this very, very broad picture of these different scenarios that were taking place, but they all come back to one thing, which is blowing America's mind, that this is what was taking place.
Yes.
On
secretly. Top
secretly on, as you mentioned, 86 different campuses in this country.
Yes. Staggering.
Not just Princeton. There were
no, and not just campuses.
Others.
The 86 included hospitals and prisons and research centers
as well. Yeah.
And most of these people never knew they were being experimented on. I mean, there were terminally ill patients that were being experimented on. There were prisoners. The CIA, the LA Times published an editorial when all of this became public. The headline of the editorial was "The CIA Blowing America's Mind." Mm-hmm. And they talked about how the nation was confronting the issue of how to prevent the intelligence agencies from destroying the very freedoms that they were set up to protect. I mean, that's the issue, right? If you think you can go around experimenting on unknowing Americans by spraying LSD in a subway to see what's going to happen to the people that happen to be in that subway car, I mean, what gives them the right? They thought they had the right because Russia was experimenting with mind control, right? It was all a matter of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. It was after the Korean War, and there was North Korean brainwashing. There was The Manchurian Candidate was written about that. Then became a movie with Frank Sinatra. So that was about a trained assassin. And as part of this MKUltra program, they were trying to create the ideal, perfect, trained assassin, hypnotically controlled. It was called Project Artichoke. It was an offshoot of MKUltra, which had many offshoots. Project Delta, many offshoots. There was what was going on up at Montauk. Much has been talked about the use of the mind control experimentation up there.
Montauk Island, yes.
Yeah, there's questions about military involvement and mind control on people who think that they have been UFO abductees. So this thing had many tentacles, and it turned out that the CIA set up a lot of dummy corporations as paymaster. So no one was actually receiving a check that said the CIA. In the case of the Institute, the checks were from the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology. I mean, have you ever heard such a stupid name for an organization?
No.
What is the Society for the Investigation of Human? What is human ecology, for God's
Human
sake?
ecology?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's who the checks were from. So, it was top secret.
Extremely top secret.
And they tried to burn all the documents. That was another part of it. You see, Richard Helms was the head of the CIA. I think we're talking 1964 and 1966 thereabouts, and he resurrected some of the mind control projects that they'd had before, and he put a big emphasis on it. He put a man named Dr. Sidney Gottlieb in charge of all these mind control projects.
I've heard
there were a lot of Germans.
Yeah.
There were a lot of ex-Nazis who got a
Operation
clean
Paperclip.
bill of health. Yeah, in this country from Project Paperclip, right? Scientists, rocket scientists. The country decided that they could use these people, so they weren't prosecuted for war crimes. They were given citizenship.
Yeah,
they were hired.
into our society.
They were integrated into our society, and especially what became the CIA in 1947, right? So, some of these experiments in MKUltra definitely had you could say, sort of a Nazi feel to it. When you read about some of the inhuman experiments that Joseph Mengele and other Nazi scientists were doing during the war, a famous MKUltra case here, McGill University, Canada, Dr. Cameron, the MKUltra project he was running up there was inhuman. It was inhuman. And the CIA was sued over that particular project and had to settle. But this was a dark time that they were getting away with this. And we don't know what they're getting away with today because everything is classified, right?
Right.
Everything is classified.
Now, I have to ask you, just from a paranoia standpoint, do you and Selby ever wonder if at some point, because you were talking about the Manchurian Candidate and things like that, do you ever wonder at some point there's something that's just going to snap in one of you and you're going to become that perfect assassin?
No, let me explain. Let me explain, Mike.
I mean, because that would scare the hell out of me. You could
have those concerns or those fantasies, but for the perfect assassin, they didn't want Ivy League students, Princeton undergraduates. They wanted loners. They wanted people with few relatives. They wanted
the hospitals, the prisons,
who could be made to disappear and nobody would notice them. And people, who were lonely, loners, no family, people where they could completely manipulate their reality. Yes, hypnosis would be used. Yes, drugs. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation about there's Sirhan. There's the Unabomber it's documented was part of one of the, I think at Harvard, one of the MKUltra programs. So, yes, there were people that were enlisted for that program, not Ivy League Princeton students. No. With us, it was a different goal and purpose, and it had to do with differentiating, as the experiments have been described and what's been released on them, differentiating between states of madness and paranoia, schizophrenia, and elevated states, expanded consciousness, kind of mystical experience of unity with the universe that can come from a psychedelic drug. They were documenting the differences because psychedelic drugs used to be called psychotomimetic drugs, meaning they mimic psychosis.
Right.
But
okay.
Humphrey Osmond didn't like that. That's why he came up with psychedelic, meaning mind manifesting drugs. So his main interest was, let's document the differences between mental illness and the psychedelic state, and let's get funding from the CIA to do that, because they're going to be they're really pushing LSD experiments, LSD as a truth serum, LSD to break down prisoners under interrogation, anything. They were looking for all the different ways LSD could be used. So Humphrey Osmond got the funding on that basis. That's where we came into the program, not assassination.
Not assassin.
No.
Okay, so
No.
so you guys, you and your families don't worry about you all offing people and taking people out as the ultimate assassins. So, okay, this is a good
that would
thing.
be another book, and
It would be actually.
Travis,
it could be
that book would be fiction.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
Okay.
Now, but you kind of bring us back to a grounded conversation about what was taking place there at Princeton and what you and Selby were part of, and that was the deep hypnosis study. And deep hypnosis actually continues to be used today in various settings by various psychological professionals. It's used to attempt to recover buried memories, such as in childhood sexual abuse cases.
Post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
The shock where the memory of something that happened in war is wiped out. There are also lots of hypnotists doing research in claims of alien abduction.
Yes,
and using hypnosis for that, right?
And especially as one of the producers of Roswell, the UFO cover-up. How do you feel about the use of deep hypnosis to recover those memories? Are those real memories? Are they implanted memories? Are they false memories? I mean, based on your really own personal experience.
Really good question. The most positive thing I can say for use of hypnosis in that circumstance is the case of Betty and Barney Hill.
Yes,
that was the first American abduction case that became nationally known. I think it was around 1966.
Mm-hmm. I've interviewed their niece, actually. Yeah, yeah.
Barney was a black postal worker, married to Betty Hill. I forget what her profession was, but they claimed that
I think she was a teacher.
Yeah.
I want to say teacher. That's the first that pops into my mind.
They claimed that while driving home, a trip that normally would have taken them like an hour and a half, took them 4 hours, and that there was a couple hours of missing time, and that they had seen a craft. That it had hovered and approached their car, and Dr. Simon was the psychiatrist they went to, who used deep hypnosis on them individually to recover their stories of what happened that night. And their stories matched, extremely detailed, and Dr. Simon concluded that whatever it was that happened to them that night, that both of Betty and Barney Hill absolutely believed it, that they were abducted by aliens. So,
and I will say real quickly, their stories matched under totally separate interrogation or interview scenarios.
Yes, yeah, I'm absolutely convinced the case is real for many reasons, including the fact that when I worked for F. Lee Bailey, the lawyer, on his television show Lie Detector. I was a segment producer in 1983. And we had Edward Gelb, who was the president of the American Polygraph Association, working on that television show. It was a daily syndicated show. We invited people on to tell their stories. They submitted to a polygraph test, and we confronted them with either that they were lying, or they'd made it up, or it was inconclusive, or the polygraph substantiates that they're telling the truth. So, for what Betty Hill was quizzed on that show, she passed the polygraph test. I had different cases on that show, one involving communication with the spirits of the dead of murder victims, Dorothy Allison, the psychic. That's another topic that preoccupied me later in life, and we could maybe touch on that a little bit, because it's another one of the key things like UFOs and MKUltra that I've focused on. However, hypnosis is not always a reliable tool with people that claim the an abduction. There's always the danger that you're going to get that the mind is going to fabricate like a dream, and then start to believe its own dream. And that's why it takes a very trained hypnotist, somebody who doesn't just suggest those things to the subject. Somebody who wants to believe they were abducted by aliens, so plants a lot of things, and that's dangerous. And yet, clearly, hypnosis has been useful as catharsis for those people who have either had the alien abduction claim or post-traumatic stress. It can be very cathartic for bringing the buried memories and buried emotions to the surface. It's a very, very useful tool.
Do you think that in the instances of individuals, let me rephrase. Strike that, Your Honor. I want to rephrase the question in the court of public opinion. The
attorney may approach the bench, and we'll discuss that.
Back in the early 80s, and you probably remember this, and it may be even part. You may even make a tie into MKUltra. I'm not sure. Back in the early 80s, I grew up in a very, very in the South in Virginia, a very, very evangelical Christian household. We went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I went to a Christian school. We were, and the churches that my parents attended were caught up in this frenzy and this fervor back in the 80s of the Satanism, witchcraft that was prevalent in daycares and pre-K and schools and things like that, and all of these things. Don't laugh, Wendy. All of these things. Honestly, though, it was like a modern day witch hunt in the 80s. I remember sitting in church and then watching the news stories and things like that. And all of these kids were coming forward with these repressed memories, and they were being brought about through deep hypnosis and regression and things like that. Is that something that? Do you think that those memories of those individuals were real? And I'm asking this because in hindsight, individuals come forward and say we made this shit up. It wasn't real. Yeah. And it started this whole witch hunt. This mob mentality. Once it started, you were almost unable to control it.
Yes. Yeah. No, I remember some of the cases involved. There was a preschool, I think, in California.
California, that's where it started, yes.
And I think that those that were put on trial were all found innocent, and it was debunked, and the so-called mental health professionals that had dealt with these children were found to have been irresponsible and to planted things in order to get stories that they wanted. So, yeah, that can happen. Sure, it can happen.
And it's very dangerous. It's a very volatile situation when these things do start taking place.
Yes.
Now, the other question that I have for you and your co-author is, first of all, you mentioned at the onset, the fear of a backlash from the Ivy Leagues, not just Princeton, but the other institutions. Have you felt that at this point? Has there been a backlash thus far over the story that you were telling?
Well, I want to say we're still waiting to see what the real reaction is going to be, because the book has only been out for a few weeks. Mm-hmm. So we don't know. We haven't heard from like our classmates at Princeton as a group yet, mm-hmm. or I know that the Princeton Alumni Weekly was considering doing a book review on it, which might come out next month. And we took a half-page ad in the Princeton Alumni Weekly for it.
That was ballsy.
Yeah. They accepted the ad. That reaches 100,000 people, right? Now we haven't sold 100,000 books in 2 weeks.
But,
I think a lot of people are ignoring it. I think a lot of people would see, that it connects Princeton with control and the LSD and think, well, I don't want to go there. But I will say that John Selby had one negative reaction from one of his classmates who I think was trying to block him from having a table at next year's reunion at Princeton to sell the book and interact with students. And this guy's objection had to do with the fact that he had a very pristine view of President Robert Goheen of Princeton, who is on a pedestal for a lot of people. And he felt that, the scene of John Selby and President Goheen dealing with LSD, disturbed him. And for him, even the slight hint. I mean, nobody says that Robert Goheen was working for the CIA. Although would he have known people that were working for the CIA? Well, he certainly knew President Nixon, and President Nixon was ultimately responsible for the CIA. President Nixon sent him to India to be the ambassador there. So we're not talking to somebody who was naive to these deep government connections, but one of John Selby's connections at Princeton, objected to the mere insinuation, you see, that President Goheen could have been mixed up in any of that, let's say. All right. So, there's definitely, there's going to be some kind of backlash coming. And that's why I ask a lot of people who are maybe not Ivy League, read the book and help defend us. Go give us a review, order it, and then give us a review at Amazon. I think there's only like 2 reviews so far.
Well, we will try to increase that. But I was going to say, obviously, a good thing is you haven't been hit with letters from Princeton's legal counsel saying cease and desist, don't publish this. So that's actually a good thing. It's
too late. It's too late for don't publish, right?
Well, yeah,
right. But on what grounds? On what grounds can anybody say that?
Exactly.
We're not lying about having been undergraduates at Princeton, both of whom have a degree, right?
Right.
And
so you were there. We
were there. Yeah. We were there.
Now, one of the things that you've hinted about it, and especially right then, but we've never. I haven't asked it point blank, and you haven't answered it point blank. Do you believe that there was complicity between the administration at Princeton and the CIA and the U.S. government? Did Princeton know what was going on?
Well, there absolutely was complicity at a certain level. All right, because on the back cover of our book, if you get the printed book, the Kindle version doesn't have a back cover. There's the New York Times, Friday, August 26, 1977. CIA tells Columbia and Princeton of secret behavioral research. All right. So at the point when all this became public and was declassified, so the CIA obviously approached the administration of Princeton and said, look, we're setting the record straight. Princeton University was involved with these particular MKUltra experiments. Now, how would that have been? Well, I think it would have been. Now, I'm guessing right now, but I think that professors in certain departments, probably the psychology department would be one of them, probably received grants. They probably applied for grants, and they got certain research grants. And they could have been conducting research while they were at the university, and it's very possible that the administration might not have known of the CIA connection. And is that why the CIA is telling Columbia and Princeton of the secret behavioral research? Or is the CIA merely rehashing for these universities something that they've known all along, right? I mean, is it possible that these look, there are certain universities, Georgetown University, where my father taught for 40 years in the School of Foreign Service, it trains people to be career, public, officers in the State Department and in the CIA, and or president. Bill Clinton was in my dad's class. He became president. The point is, and Princeton too. Many Princeton graduates have gone on to work, for the U.S. government in many capacities, and certainly the CIA and other intelligence functions. No question. Mm-hmm. So there are certain universities in this country that prepare people for that future life. And is Princeton one of them? Well, clearly. At Princeton we have the Woodrow Wilson School of Foreign Affairs. There's a lot of interest in American foreign policy. That was my dad's specialty at Georgetown, American foreign policy, American diplomatic history. You get career civil servants and intelligence people that come out of those schools. So it's a fact. It's a fact. We were surrounded by people that were in that milieu. We didn't even know it. All right. We were both pretty naive. Okay. And we were also busy having a good time then too, as will become clear when you read.
Yeah, obviously.
Where there are a few dorm parties in some of those chapters, Travis. That
surely not.
That raised a smile.
There were.
See, Travis forgot to send the copy to me,
no.
I'm kind of just playing along, going, mm-hmm.
Oh,
that's why
he's
getting to conduct the interview.
Travis, don't forget.
Well, I want to tell you, there was one sentence that was in the earlier draft of our book that I loved, and somehow in all the edits we did, it got cut out of the book. But I thought it was such a good sentence, and it said that alcohol was the fuel that Princeton ran on.
True of most colleges and universities.
Yeah.
It really
Definitely.
is. Well, and I was going to say, you were talking about, when it comes to the CIA, coming clean, was it because that professors applied for grants? My ex-wife is a college professor. She's a tenured track professor in communication at the only branch of the University of Virginia. I know college professors, they will apply for grants right and left, and they don't really care who the hell funds them. If there's money out there for what they're researching, they apply for it. So
it's possible they wouldn't know that if the money was coming from the CIA. If they were applying to the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology.
Exactly. That's all that they needed to know, and they get the funding and they go forward with it. And again, it's that whole dubious kind of scenario where the government is in the background, behind the shadows, behind the scenes,
pulling the strings,
and everyone's doing exactly what they are supposed to be doing because we have created a system in which there are checks and balances. And as long as you obey the checks and balances, you yourself think you're doing fine.
Right.
You don't think you're doing anything wrong. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, by the way, it's like Candid Camera. Oh, by the way, the CIA's here. Guess what? Everything you've been doing, right. we've been maneuvering, we've been manipulating the entire time. But thanks for joining. Thanks for playing along. Here's your grant money. It's like, wow.
To talk about another aspect of that manipulation, how is it that LSD became so prevalent in this country in the late 1960s? Where did it come from? Mm-hmm. Well, the original LSD was manufactured in Switzerland by the Sandoz Corporation. And let me tell you, the CIA was the main purchaser of LSD from Sandoz. Mm-hmm. And they used it for their experiments from the beginning. And then Timothy Leary got a hold of it. Timothy Leary started his psychedelic research with mushrooms, with psilocybin. And, he was a very distinguished psychologist. He was a very important psychologist at Harvard. And then he got mixed up with the psychedelics. But some of his research was absolutely fascinating. He gave the mushrooms to prisoners and followed them to see how many of them that had the psychedelic experience didn't end up going back to prison again, right? And he found that that many of those who had the psychedelic experience didn't end up committing other crimes that ended up in them getting sent back to prison. Well, that's valuable research. And then Timothy Leary gets LSD. And it's coming from Sandoz. It's coming from the CIA. He had his CIA connections. They all did. The thing is that I think the CIA felt betrayed by Timothy Leary. because they never wanted it to go public in the way he publicized it. He said, look, everybody should turn on. Let's have an enlightened society. Let's have everybody, experience nirvana, and there'll be a lot more love to go around, right? We'll have a better society. That was his pitch. And then you had hippies and you had communes. Well, that wasn't the CIA plan. I mean, it fell into part of their agenda when a lot of these people who dropped out, when it kind of splintered the anti-Vietnam War movement, right? Because you had those that went to the psychedelic revolution, then you had those who were the protesters, the troublemakers. So all of this was going on back then. And then you had a man named Owsley, Augustus Owsley Stanley was his name. He began manufacturing LSD, and Owsley acid, then there was as much of that as there was Sandoz acid. Like he did 1.5 million hits of acid. And that's where Ken Kesey got the acid for the electric Kool-Aid acid test. Ken Kesey bought a 1939 school bus, painted it up in psychedelic colors, and with his band of merry pranksters drove from city to city, giving people the acid test, letting them have LSD in a Kool-Aid drink. Whatever city he went to, turned on thousands of people. But none of it would have happened, this is my contention, if the LSD hadn't been promoted as a primary research priority of the CIA to begin with. And as you'll see in the book, at the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute, they continued to have large supplies of LSD at a time when officially the LSD research centers had been shut down when it was made illegal in 1966. Wasn't the case that they were all shut down. Humphrey Osmond marched along and continued. So those that had the blessing of the CIA kept at it.
Right.
When they ever stopped, if they ever stopped, who knows? I think the priorities of intelligence changed massively over the last 20, 30 years as technology gave them lots of tools for spying on people and getting at people's personal data that they never had before. You don't have to interrogate somebody to death if you can just read all their emails, right?
Exactly.
So the rules have changed, the priorities have changed because the technology has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I have to ask you a question. We're coming close to the bottom of the hour, top of the hour. It's amazing how quickly. First of all, I want to have you back on. Will you be willing to come back on and continue the conversation?
Yes, I will.
Absolutely.
And Travis, I want to make sure I mention something I didn't really mention, which is important, is that though my first movie after the American Film Institute was not blowing America's mind, the first film that I directed and produced, Todd Easton Mills, I produced it with him, was called Timothy Leary's Dead. And it was the biography of LSD guru Timothy Leary, which I made with Leary the year before his passing. He had cancer. He knew he was going to die. And he authorized me to make his biography. And so Timothy Leary's Dead, which is a Moody Blues song, it's in the movie too. That movie you can find online now and stream it. And that I made back in, it was released in 1997. So, I never would have made that movie if I hadn't had all these experiences at the New Jersey Neuropsychiatric Institute in Princeton. Wouldn't have happened because that pointed me in that direction. So that was one thing to mention. The other thing is that to get the printed book of Blowing America's Mind, I suggest going to Amazon and getting it there, and they also have the Kindle version. So if you have something other than a Kindle for an ebook reader, I think you can find it at Barnes & Noble, and just check other people that sell the other formats, because it's all around, and it's in other countries too. I mean, I know that the ebook is available in England, Australia, Japan. I've seen it's gotten out around the world. The printed book, though, I think it's here in the United States, and I guess you could order it from Amazon in Canada and get it that way too.
Wonderful. Now, my question was going to be something that you said early on, and it piqued my interest concerning a couple of other guests that we've had on the show. You were talking about the government-induced experiments on the populations without their knowing, and that was that's happened many times. We know that, but in regard to a certain conspiracy that's been floating around the internet over the past couple of years, contrails versus chemtrails, in the skies. What are your personal thoughts on that particular topic? Because we've had guests on to talk about it, and they have very, very distinct beliefs. Do you think that the U.S. government is basically germinating our air with something at high altitudes with the use of chemtrails?
I'm going to duck a yes or no answer to that question.
Well, damn.
Because I don't have the scientific background to, but
I'm asking
here's one thing.
I'm asking for a personal opinion based on someone.
Yeah.
Who
Here's one thing I have heard from a lot of people that do believe that the chemtrails are, dangerous to public health, and that it's a deliberate experiment also on our atmosphere. Why is it that none of these people can get any traction to get attention for their claims from anyone in Congress or the Senate? They're all given the cold shoulder. They're shut down. No one will even look at it. It's poison to look at. It's like the UFO subject had been almost forever. Yep. It's only been in the last maybe 10 years that some Congress people, there's been hearings on UFOs, the public disclosure movement, and so some of them are starting to listen and be willing to go on the record with some comment publicly. All right, but for decades, no one in Congress would touch UFOs. It was just all, there are none. Project Blue Book studied that. They found nothing. We haven't studied UFOs in the government for 50 years.
And
nothing there.
And then all of a sudden there's a news story that breaks and said, by the way, we've been funding $22 million a year into a UFO government study.
Oh, what a coincidence. We've just
really?
This up. Oh, really? And and they have some metal from UFOs. Oh, when did they get that? Could it have been from the Roswell incident? No, the Roswell incident, that was a balloon, as we've been told. If it wasn't a weather balloon, then it was a mogul balloon. So lies, 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 lies. So you're asking me, are there lies connected with the chemtrails stuff?
Of course.
And I'm saying back to you, why won't anybody in Congress or the Senate even touch it to talk about it? Or look at it. They won't.
They won't. And I'm going to ask another question, and I do not want a yes or no. I'm just posing a question. This is a rhetorical.
Okay.
Shut up, Wendy. It's like when did I have this relationship? It's like, say goodnight, Gracie. It's like, shut up, Wendy.
Right.
Just don't even.
Right.
No,
except that I'm really not very obedient. I just haven't been feeling very well myself.
Yeah, I know. So,
okay.
Yeah, I've had free reign tonight. That doesn't happen often at all. I posed the question a couple months ago to a particular guest about the chemtrails and the rise in aggression and the rise in violent crimes, and especially the rise in unmotivated shootings in this country.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to pose out there is it a possibility that what we're seeing is the end result of something that maybe they didn't even know what the hell they were doing to begin with?
There's a lot of possibilities. Maybe that's one. As a Hollywood guy, I want to say that I don't think that Hollywood is without blame on this thing. I think that the level of violence, gratuitous violence we've seen in a lot of movies, whether it's Batman or so many movies have mass slaughter. Yes. I would go there quicker in looking for nefarious influences. I would go there quicker than before I'd go to something in our atmosphere. Because there's a lot of people that are still living pretty tranquil lives, right? And
absolutely.
Absolutely. These people that commit these horrendous crimes are fortunately, the tiny minority and the exception, although a lot of people suffer and die because of their crimes.
They do. And I applaud that answer. I really do. Coming from broadcasting, and I've worked in the film industry, I've worked in documentary films and television and things like that. I actually applaud that particular answer. It's saying, Hollywood actually needs to stand up and take some accountability for what they've done over the years. I
think so. I mean, I would never want to go back to the Hayes committee censorship, right?
No, God, no.
But there should be some, I don't know, some conscious
just reasonable accountability.
But there is no self-policing on that regard because so many of the films that go there into this violence are, and so the commerciality of it is always a major motivation for why something gets made rather than something else.
I agree with that very much. Paul, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Travis, thank you.
You have been an amazing guest. One of the things that Wendy and I really pride ourselves on is having reoccurring guests, those people that want to come back. I am honored that you will come back. I will stay in touch with you. I want to get you to come back on to continue talking about this. But I know, that gut feeling, I'm not psychic. I don't have any type of innate ability, but I know that as a writer and as a producer and as a creative individual, you have to have other projects that you're working on right now.
Yes, and I did want to talk about my film, The Life After Death Project.
Yes.
It became the book. It became the book An Atheist in Heaven. And if they're easily available, at Amazon, An Atheist in Heaven is the book, and The Life After Death Project. The DVD has 2 DVDs. It was on Sci-Fi, then I did a sequel. But you'll understand from that why I am so favorable to the belief that life goes on, and that there is spirit, and that spirit is sometimes in touch with the living, communicating with us. And, I don't know whether you want to call it angels or the undead or whatever you want to. This is something that has touched my life that I have also experienced since the death of a great mentor to me, Forrest J. Ackerman. Ackerman is in my film The Sci-Fi Boys, and he's the subject of The Life After Death Project. When he died at age 92, a lot of strange things started happening that seemed like Fari was in touch. And then came this very large book with 3 universities participating, scientists participating in the evidence that came to me, a book called An Atheist in Heaven, The Ultimate Evidence for Life After Death. So I urge your listeners to look for those projects too, in addition to Blowing America's Mind.
And I would love to have you come back on and discuss that particular topic, because that, I think, is an amazing and very interesting aspect, and would love to have you come back on. We'll spend 2 hours discussing that particular project.
We'll pick a date.
We will do it. We'll get you back on, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. Wendy, you have picked, as always, Wendy is quiet tonight. This is very unusual for Wendy. But she has a great programming director. Wendy, what song are we going out with?
Well, because I didn't have Timothy Leary is Dead, I decided to go with Bela Lugosi's Dead.
That might work. Yeah, that would.
Hey, I do what I can.
So we are going out. Paul Davids, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, very, very much.
You have been.
Thanks for having me as a guest.
You have been an amazing guest. I will be in touch with you. We will have you scheduled back within the next couple of months. I want to get you back on quickly.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Hope you have a good evening and a Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you. Yes.
Same to you, both.
Thank you. And we will be back. We need to get a guest for next week. And on the 10th, we will have Bill Bean back on the show.
Yes, we
will. And possibly Bill and I will have done an exorcism and deliverance together. Cross and Loudermilk together again? I mean, come on.
Everyone listening, start praying for this poor individual that Travis is going to assist with. Bill will take care of it, but
I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah, we gotta help Travis out if we can.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Happy New Year to you, Deborah. Thanks for joining me in the chat room.
yes.
And Seth Michael, I believe you and
Seth
Jill
Michael.
are listening. Happy New Year to you guys. Hope you're having a good dinner, and we didn't gross you out. We didn't get your question, but we'll do her next time, bub.
Yes, we will.
Yep.
And Wendy lady, Happy New Year to you. Even though I would know I will talk to you New Year's Eve. I will call you at 1 a.m. my time, midnight your time.
Yeah. I undoubtedly, and since we do chat back and forth all day, most
We
days
will be
anyway.
talking.
So yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll be
And
talking.
yes, Deborah, Bill is an spiritual warrior, exorcist type guy. Very involved, very, very upstanding.
Yes. So,
All right.
and that means I can wear my priest collar again. I haven't worn that since Halloween a couple years ago.
Now, do the Methodists have it like the Catholic collar, or is it different?
Do the Baptists? The Baptists do not.
I'm sorry.
But I. Well, I mean, they actually do.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they can. I mean, it is not. The Catholics don't own the corner in the market. I mean, any ordained minister can wear the collar.
Right.
Yeah.
The Church of
It's
England
just-
has them, right?
Exactly. In Presbyterians, Methodists, they all do. The Baptists just choose to wear a shirt and tie. But I actually do have the collar, so. I also have an exorcism kit that I bought in Rome, and I actually have holy water that I stole from the Vatican.
Well, they give holy water away for free, so probably
Not to non-Catholics.
Well, yeah, we're pretty good that way. We're generous.
You are generous. You are.
I'll be discussing that with the Archbishop of Kansas City.
Tell him I said hi.
I will. Yeah.
Give him my best.
We're gonna do a little Santeria dance.
That'd be me. The excommunicated Southern Baptist minister that stole holy water from the Vatican says, "Happy New Year."
Bless your little heart.
Oh, Paul was a great guest.
He was a fantastic guest.
He was fantastic. I read his bio, read the book, but I wasn't piecing things together because it has been a crazy month.
Right.
Transformers, Star Wars. My God, this man.
Right. I wish I had known
a
a little bit more along those lines, but I really.
I owe this man my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
He shaped me and molded. Now you all may not think this man, but he molded me and shaped me to the person that I am today. I mean, but I'm just saying. There may be he may have people showing up at his home with pitchforks and torches, but anyway.
Very possibly.
Oh, yeah. So is the song playing, or have we played the song yet?
We have not played the song yet. We are still live, Travis.
We're still live. Okay, I'm sorry. We were just joking. On behalf of all of us at Mystic Moon Cafe, and we have an enormous family, in all honesty. We really do. The Mystic Moon Mafia. Wendy, myself, Justin, and Seth, and June, and Kim, and Jill, and Bill Bean, and Andrea Perrin, and Nick Redfern, and all of our guests that we've had over just this year alone, since we've been on this new platform of Spreaker.com. We have such an amazing family of individuals. It's amazing. We are very blessed. We really are. And what I love about this particular program is it doesn't matter anyone's religion or their belief or their faith, or we're pretty damn accepting. And we are. Mm-hmm. And we appreciate and thank each one of you for always tuning in, listening, downloading, chatting with us. The Peanut Gallery, we love the Peanut Gallery. Absolutely. I know they don't like the name that I gave them, but I call them the Peanut Gallery, and that's just it's just what I've got. So but we do, and we wish you all a very happy new year. And thank you so much for making us part of your 2017. And please, 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 God, make us part of your 2018. We really want to be part of your 2018.
Guys, he's on a roll. I don't think I can stop
We need
him at
that.
this point.
We
Yeah.
need that. We need to be part of your 2018. Make us part of your 2018. Become part of the Mystic Moon Mafia. I swear to God, this year is going to be the year we're going to have
It feels
merchandise.
like one of those commercials for, the ASPCA or children or whatever.
For 25 cents, a day, you could have a cup of coffee, or you could sponsor Mystic Moon Mafia.
Right. So please, donate generously today.
Yeah, funny story. My grandmother, she died when she was 90. She had Alzheimer's.
Okay.
But she used to. She lived with my parents for the last few years of her life. But I used to love listening to those commercials with Sally Struthers and
Marlo Thomas.
For 25 cents a day, you could buy a cup of coffee, or you can support a child in Ethiopia, African thing. All those things. My grandmother used to sit there and watch those ads on TV, and she goes, "You know what?" She goes, "I sent 25 cents a day for several months. I never one time saw my little Ethiopian baby on my doorstep."
Oh, yeah.
I know. It was sad, but kind of funny at the same time, because I'm going, "Memo, what the hell were you done with an Ethiopian baby?"
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
You're an 88-year-old white woman in the mountains of Virginia. What were you going to do with an Ethiopian baby?
Love it.
Love it. Yeah, and she would have.
Uh-huh.
Would have. Anyway. Do make us part of 2018. This will be the year we have merchandise. There will be Mystic Moon Mafia merchandise, I swear to God.
I would prefer us be the Mystic Moon Mob, because that would make us the mafia of badassery.
Oh, okay, we can do that. There will be fedoras. There will be,
T-shirts.
T-shirts. There will, business cards. There will be, golden knuckles. Silver knuckles. We'll have. There'll be merch. We'll have merch.
Ooh, we're gonna have swag.
We will have swag. I guarantee it. This will be the year. Anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. We love you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. We're gonna go out with Churches. Bela Lugosi's dead.
Lugosi's death. Windy Lady, I will talk to you tomorrow.
White on white, translucent black cape. Back on the ride. Bela Lugosi's dead. The bats have left the belter. The victims have been bled. Red velvet lines the black box. Bela
Thank you for joining us tonight. You've been listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. Join us every Wednesday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. On behalf of Wendy Schindler, this is Travis Short saying have a great rest of your week.